Small, low performance, disgusting, words that can be very well used to describe me. I mean the CRJ-1000 from Bombardier, a plane that we have previously called the crappy regional jet. Yeah, because it is. You know the acronym CRJ, even though it actually stands for Canadian Regional Jet, but I just call it crappy. It isn't all too big and comfortable. Look at those seats. Look at how cramped this plane is. Yeah, this jet is often described as unflyable for anyone that's over 6 feet. Luckily, bigger variants, the CRJ-400, 700, 500, 900, and it goes up to even 1000, the biggest CRJ. And oh no, I was trying to improve your image. That has not worked at all. What was that, dude? We just completely overran you.
Yeah, I think those clips summarize what my expectations were for this flight. As you can see, the CRJ aircraft family is known to be quite uncomfortable for passengers. However, today I'll be flying this aircraft to see for myself if these statements are true. If you haven't already, make sure to check out my last video where I flew Iberia Express, one of Iberia's subsidiaries. Today I'll be flying another of the flag carrier subsidiaries, Air Nostrum, also known as Iberia Regional, upon their Bombardier CRJ-1000. Air Nostrum operates using the Iberia brand by using their livery, flight numbers and booking system. However, despite them being part of the Iberia Group, they operate as an independent airline with their own crew. This airline usually operates regional flights domestically around Spain and occasionally to small towns in neighbouring countries. So today's question is flying Air Nostrum aboard their CRJ aircraft worth it, or is it best to avoid it? Well, join me today as I fly them on their CRJ-1000, the largest CRJ variant from Madrid to Granada in the south of Spain. Bienvenido from Madrid Barajas Airport, Terminal 4, where pretty much all Iberia flights out of Madrid operates. As soon as I walked in, I found myself in a sea of people as the airport was packed. There were queues everywhere, and I've heard that the airport is like this on a regular basis, especially in the early afternoon when many flights operate. The queue for check-in was extremely long and it took me a good half hour to get through. There were many self-checking kiosks available for the majority of people to use, but these didn't make the queues move faster, and they were quite confusing to use. After checking, I headed through security, which wasn't the fastest I've ever been through, but it also wasn't the slowest. I'll also point out that all Iberia flights, no matter whether they are domestic or international, all operate out of the same terminal in Madrid, so there isn't a separate area or terminal unlike some other airports that I've flown out of, such as Istanbul. This, however, means that you are able to shop in duty-free shops and can access a wider selection of shops and restaurants in the terminal. After some time, I headed to the gate, which was right at the end of the building, as that is where all of the smaller aircraft park up. The gates was very small and therefore got very busy as my flight was full. It took quite some time for boarding to begin due to a lack of staff, which was unfortunate, but this didn't really create a delay. My aircraft for today is an 8-year-old CRJ-1000, which was delivered to Air Nostrum in late 2016 and wears a special livery. Before boarding, if you had a large carry-on, you had to hand it into the gate staff so that they put it in the small cargo hold under the aircraft, as the overhead bins are too small, and these are returned on the tarmac as soon as you disembark after landing. I was able to be one of the first to board as I had Group 2 priority boarding because it was included in my ticket fare. On board there are 104 seats in total, with 14 seats being classed as business class, but they are pretty much identical to all the other seats. Looking for some extra leg room? Then make sure to try and sit on rows 17 and 18 as they are exit rows. I made sure to snag seat 27A on the last row, as being an AvGeek, I just had to have the unique window view for the engine at the rear, instead of them being under the wings. However, for this reason, I would recommend sitting towards the front for a quieter flight. The seat itself is rather comfortable and offers quite a generous amount of legroom despite being a bit narrow and quite old looking. In front there is a rather flimsy tray table and also a seats pocket including an in-flight magazine, which was always nice to see, especially after COVID, the onboard menu, the safety card and an air sickness bag. There is also a small recline, but this isn't anything great. The recliner in my seat is also the same as all the others despite it being in the last row. You can also find individual air vents above. too long after, we pushed back and took off for Granada. After takeoff, I tried to access the entertainment that was supposed to be available to stream onto devices like it says on the sign in front. However, this didn't work at all for the duration of the flight. On board, there are only 2 lavatories for the whole aircraft, which basically means that each lavatory is shared between 52 people, which sounds like quite a lot, but there were no queues or waits at all on this flight. Unsurprisingly, the lavatories are quite tight and simple and also a bit messy. However, I did see the camera crew clean it up a few times as it's literally next door to my seat. This had become a little bit irritating during the flights, as every time the door opened I would get a slight whiff of the smell, but it didn't affect me too much. I checked out the in-flight menu, which turned out to look more appetizing than the one on Iberia Express, by offering more hot food, which is even better when you consider that Air Nostrum operates more shorter flights. The crew started the service shortly after takeoff, however they were unable to get through half of the aircraft as the flight was too short and they were a bit slow. However, to be fair, there were only 2 cabin crew, which can slow things down a lot, and there were also lots of heavy turbulence as this was a very small aircraft. In comparison, on a Turkish Airlines flight between Istanbul and Dalaman, which I have taken many times before on a larger Airbus A321, the crew hand out a hot sandwich and a choice of drinks to all passengers. However, they have more crew as there are more passengers, and the meals are also free, meaning that time is not wasted taking payments. This flight is also slightly longer at 1 hour compared with 45 minutes on today's flight. As you would expect, this flight went very quickly, and not too long after reaching cruising altitude we began our descent. I paid about £50 for this flight, which seems reasonable for the service I was offered. However, it was a letdown as I didn't have the chance to purchase some food or drinks during the flight. As I was seated in the last row, I was sat next to the camera crew's jump seat, and I was therefore able to talk with one of the crew during the descent. She was extremely friendly and was telling me about what it's like flying for the airline, which made out to be sound really relaxed compared with other airlines due to the much shorter flights. Thanks to the amazing crew, I was given the opportunity to meet the pilots on the flight deck after landing, where we talked for some time. Something that I found very interesting was that the captain described flying the aircraft as feeling like flying a military jet, as it had very good control. After landing in Granada, I found the airport to be very small, which isn't much of a surprise as Granada is not a very big town. Ultimately, if you are a nervous traveller, I think that you should consider flying a slightly larger aircraft, as there was lots of heavy turbulence throughout the flight, as the CRJ is a very small aircraft, and this turned out to be the most annoying thing for the aircraft instead of the actual cabin. Thank you for watching, and just before you go, please consider subscribing and giving this video a like. It'll be greatly appreciated. Thank you and happy travels.